So where do we use social presencing theater, and in particular kind of the practice you are going to see in a few minutes from now? We use it in the co-sensing space, which the same activity we talked about before the break. And co-sensing basically is two things. Number one, you have to take a deep dive into the front line and the periphery of the system. You do that in a million different ways, kind of a million different methods for that. But that's only part one. Part two is you come back together as a team and then you make sense together of all the different kind of golden nuggets that you return with. Now, what are the methods you can use for this collective sense-making? There is like systems thinking, there's scenario thinking, there's a bunch of other useful methodologies. But in our practice, and we use kind of all of them in different contexts, but what we are more and more gravitating towards is using social presencing theater. For two reasons, as far as I am concerned. One is that it makes particularly visible the deep transformation structure of a social field, which otherwise you often tend to miss. And number two, it's fast. It doesn't take weeks or months. Time is money. We don't have money in our projects. We all know the problem, right? So we have like a finite amount of time. How can you use that finite amount of time to have deep impact? Well, social presencing theater, in our experience, is a methodology that in a relatively short amount of time allows you to crystallize the essence of all this research that went on before in a particularly effective way. And for example, in China, I remember kind of having gone with a cross-sector group, but many from the public sector, through learning journeys. They went through prototyping initiatives. They did a lot of sensing journeys with all the stakeholders they wanted to engage, and then they make sense of that and kind of revise the way they wanted to run their prototype. And it all felt wrong, right? So it's all the right things on paper, but it didn't feel like really transformative. It's like the old mindset, basically. And then we asked them to basically synthesize their stakeholder sensing activities around each of their prototype initiatives, which were groups of 5, 6, 7 usually, in a mapping, right? Sculpture 1, current reality, Sculpture 2, kind of emerging future. And then it happened that it, suddenly clarified what was wrong with the old social sculpture and why they needed to change their intervention. They needed to really rethink and reinvent what they want to do in terms of their prototype in order to transform the old system. I remember there was one, the government in the center of Sculpture 1 telling the citizens what you need, right? They never asked the question, so what they need and how they would, get the services or the solutions for what supposedly was their needs. While in the Sculpture 2, kind of this central structure of the government and all the disempowered people was more moving to the periphery and holding the space for the other stakeholders to more directly interact and listen to each other and interact and co-create around these needs that got clarified that way. So that's like a simple example. But they, from all the talking to the stakeholders, they couldn't really bring all that together. They had the data, but they couldn't bring it together in a collective sense-making mechanism. So why SPT? Why social presencing theater? Because it gives you immediately, and this thing doesn't take longer than 60 or 90 minutes, immediately you have a collective language and a collective perception of what's wrong and broken with the current system and what are potential pathways of moving it into a different direction. And if in a team of very different stakeholders with very different mental models, you have a collective language, an image as a reference point, so you talk about the same thing, because we all saw what happened and we all heard everyone's debrief, that's worth a lot. Because it's like, when you build a house, you have a firm ground to build something on. If you have this perception, I have another one, we have sand, it's moving. We have nothing firm to build, to construct a shared building on. So it's worth a lot, this kind of foundation, and that's exactly what social presencing theater does.